So I've been sent some questions here for a blog, and I thought they're really great questions, so I might as well share them and the answers, mainly about horse welfare. It's such a hot topic at the moment, and it's such an important issue for us. You know, it's always important, but it's nice to get it out there in the public domain, and it's nice that people get to see how much we care for our horses. So here we go. What are your thoughts on the topic of horses being used for entertainment purposes and the idea that they develop medical conditions, suffer heart attacks and develop other injuries to it? Well, first of all, horses being used for entertainment purposes, that's pretty much all they're used for these days. Whether it's happy hacking, show jumping or racing, you could call it all entertainment. Thankfully horses aren't being sent out to war anymore. I think we lost about 1 million horses in World War I, so thankfully we don't do that anymore. And we don't use them for transport anymore because we have cars, so really entertainment is the only purpose they're used for, and if we didn't use them for that, then we'd have no need to keep breeding them, so there would hardly be any horses. As for the other part of the question, the medical conditions, heart attacks and injuries, it's sad. We hate to see it, anybody hates to see it, and we do everything we can to prevent it. And when it does happen, we also do everything we can to get horses back to full health. We probably spend about 50% of our time making sure that the horses are fit and healthy and well. So a lot of attention is given to their general health and well-being, whether it's the feeding, how we do the exercise we do, and then any horses that do have even a little niggling injury, whether it's a rash, we spend a lot of time at the yard treating them, looking after them and trying to keep them 100%. What would you say to the people who think horses are pushed to their limits and are mistreated in horse racing? Well, they're certainly not mistreated by us or the majority of people that I've ever worked with. I probably have seen a little bit of, I suppose the closest thing I've seen to horses being mistreated is people losing their temper with horses when they probably shouldn't. That probably just comes down to people's lack of horsemanship or being able to handle horses. Race horses aren't easy to handle, and I suppose there are a lot of people who aren't, you know, to the level of Monty Roberts, Gary Whitterford. A lot of people just don't know as much as they think they do about handling horses. So I suppose when I see people lose their temper, thankfully it doesn't happen very often, but that's the closest I see to horses being mistreated. I've never worked anywhere where horses are neglected, malnourished or just not looked after properly. I have heard of that going on, but I've never seen it, and I definitely wouldn't condone it in any way, shape or form. What are your thoughts on the idea that legal welfare standards for horses should be implemented? Would this be welcome to an extent? Absolutely, it would be welcomed by me, and I know plenty of other people that would welcome it. A lot of us have very high standards, and I think we would all like to see other people being kept to that standard. That would be great. It would benefit horses massively. How you would police it, I don't know, but I suppose that would be a problem for someone else. Do you believe there is any way to convince those who are strongly against horse racing that it is in fact not cruel? I suppose in a lot of ways, if someone believes something, it's very hard to convince them otherwise. You know, just think of religion or politics. People believe what they believe. We can only show them what we do, which is why we do these videos. We put stuff on social media all the time. I've got stuff on our YouTube channel, nice long videos showing exactly the care we give for horses. Most of the people that see those videos are a little bit surprised, but they're very pleased to see it. So yeah, changing people's minds is very difficult, and what more can be done to highlight the positives within the sport? Well, I'd go back to putting the videos on social media and on YouTube. I think that's the best thing we can do, because then it's there for people to see, and I think once people see it, it's harder for them to argue. And like I said, if people believe it, unfortunately they're going to believe it. Many welfare charities want the whip banning, but it is known to be an important safety feature for both the horse and jockey. Where do you stand on the use of the whip? Could rules be implemented to suit both? Yes, I do think you should be able to carry a whip, especially in a race. It's a dangerous situation, and with some horses you do need the whip for that extra bit of control. Again, I do think it gets used too much. I think personally, and when I was riding, I rode plenty of winners where I didn't hit the horse more than probably 3 times. I always had a, you know, it was just my ethos to not be any harder on a horse than I had to get the result that we could. So for me, I think if I was going to change it, I'd say let jockeys carry a whip, but let them only hit the horse 3 times. It would make the jockeys think much more about being tactical and using those 3 hits at exactly the right time, rather than at the moment, I think the sort of mentality is to keep the whip down until the final furlong and then hit them 7 times in the final furlong. So I think if you're only allowed to hit the horse 3 times, some horses you might find yourself using the whip halfway through the race to keep them in a good position, and others you would leave those 3 hits to the last 100 yards. But I think that would make racing much more interesting. It'd be more challenging for the jockeys, and it would be kinder on the horses essentially. I also must note, with the rules now, there seems to be no limit on how many times a jockey can slap a horse down the neck, and I hate seeing it when they're like whack 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 down the neck because it's not counted as a hit. To me, that's still a hit. It's nowhere near as severe, I agree, but I think there should also be a limit on that. Right. What would you say to the people who want to see an end to all horse racing because it is intrinsically cruel? Intrinsically cruel. I think there are a lot crueler things that go on in the world. I think a lot of people get treated far more cruel than racehorses do. And I suppose I go back to my point of the first question. If we stopped racing, that's 10,000 horses a year just in the UK that wouldn't get bred. So, I mean, it would completely decimate the horse population, not to mention put many people out of a job, you know, not just racing, but everything that's associated with racing. People that work in studs, I mean, the betting industry would almost collapse. So, and I don't agree that if it was cruel, we should keep it going for those reasons, but I just don't think that racing is cruel. Like I said, horses do get pushed, don't get me wrong, but I think there are far crueler things in the world, you know, so if I was going to campaign for something, I wouldn't be drawing my attention to that. I think there would be much more worthy causes to campaign for. What does a jockey do aboard a horse to prevent injury and ensure the safety of the horse they are riding? That comes down to the ability of the rider. I have certain standards that I set for my riders. The main thing is to keep horses balanced, keep them calm and keep them straight. A lot of times when horses get excited, they tend to want to go sideways. They swing their back end one way and their head goes the other way and they end up going sideways, and that's when they're sort of stepping over themselves, and they're much more likely to do little injuries, even though it's just knocks and cuts. It's not good for the horses. Also, if they're doing any sort of work with their head one way or the other, they're using one side of their body in a different way to the other. So the main thing I always tell my riders is to keep a horse straight, keep them balanced and keep them calm. If you do that, that saves 90% of the injuries, especially the keeping calm part. If everybody stays calm, then usually nobody gets hurt. Behind the scenes and a day in a life. Do you have any examples of horses which you trained that were retired due to not making a suitable racehorse and have gone to another career, i.e. show jumping, that you can tell us about? I've had a few horses that we've retired and have gone on. The most recent one was a lovely little filly. She was a good 2-year-old before she came to us. Then when we got her, she was only 3, but she'd had a lot of racing at 2, and one of her knees was just a little bit sore. There wasn't any permanent damage there, but she was at the point where we could either medicate the knee and keep pushing, but from the way she was, you could tell she wasn't really enjoying it, and in a race she wasn't really letting herself down. It goes back to horses pushing themselves. She was definitely keeping a little bit back, so in a races she wasn't performing as well as she could have done, and she was a sweet little filly, so we took the decision to retire her, and she has a life of Riley now. She went to the National Horse Racing Museum to be retrained, and in her time there she found a new owner, and she lives still in Newmarket, and she has a great time. She's got a social media page, can't think of the name of it now, I'll let you know that. But yeah, she's a happy hacker and absolutely loving life. Gorgeous, Cook Up a Storm she's called, by the way. Gorgeous little filly, so pleased. And she's not the only one. I've had several that we've retired, and we make a point of finding them a nice home, and we always make sure, or try to make sure, that they'll go to a permanent home. The one thing you don't want is to sell a horse out of training and then give it to somebody who's just going to retrain it and sell it on for a profit. That's not what we're about. How do you decide when a horse should go on their holidays away from the racetrack? Well, traditionally it used to be a seasonal thing, but with year-round racing, I've found in my personal experience, and some owners are still set in the mindset of that seasonal thing, oh, we've had so much racing, the horse needs a break. And what I have experienced is when a horse is running well and the owner decides they want to give him a break, when you give a horse a break, it's very, very difficult to get them back to their absolute peak when they were doing well. So personally, when they're doing well, I keep running them. We just keep them ticking over. We never try and over race a horse. So we try and keep them in good form as long as we can. And then if their form either tapers off or they pick up an injury, then that's the time for us to give them a rest. And that works out the best for the horse and for us. What is the process of winding a horse down to go on holiday, and then the process of gradually bringing the horse back to fitness ready to race? Well, depending on why you're stopping the horse, sometimes it's an injury and you've just got to leave them in their box for a month at least usually. If it's something like a fractured pelvis or a stress fracture, you really don't want the horse moving, so they'll spend about 4 weeks in the stable. Then what you'll do is bring them out and walk them, whether it's hand walking or putting them on the horse walker. You'll start just 20 minutes a day and then gradually build up. We get them up to about an hour and a half a day on the walker, and we'll do that for about a month before we then get a rider on them, and then they'll do just a bit of trotting, nice gentle work and some hack canters. So I'd say from the point that we stop, whether it's box rest, if it's not box rest, they're probably straight out in the paddock. Horses do like being turned out. Horses do get injured being turned out, so we don't just throw them out and forget about them. I always worry when we turn horses out, because they're race horses, it's in their nature to gallop around, and when they gallop around with nobody controlling them, that's when, you know, injuries happen. But generally, if they haven't got an injury, we'll turn them out. If they have got an injury, then there's a bit of R&R. But I would say from a horse doing zero to a horse being ready to race, they're all different obviously, but it's about 3 to 4 months. So it's a month walking, a month trotting, and then you gradually wind them up into full work. And most horses, I'd say you'd want them to do about 5 or 6 bits of fast work before they're ready to really go and face the racetrack. Like I said, they're all different, but that would be an average. Which people within the team spend the most time looking after, grooming, examining, caring for the horses, and what exactly do they do? Well, there's probably me, Sarah, who works on the yard. She is based on the yard all the time, so technically she would spend the most time with all the horses. Georgia, my apprentice, she works full-time, so she's in the yard all the time, riding, and then she's in the yard doing evening stables, sometimes on her own. She's great, Georgia. She's so reliable and she's so attentive. Whoever is doing the job, and they're all like it. Sarah's really good, Georgia's really good. If there's anything that's not quite right, they notice, because they spend so much time with the horses and they're very diligent at what they do. They make sure they check everything and they let me know straight away. And yeah, I would like to think that whatever happens, we're pretty good at getting on top of it, and we pick things up early, which eventually, you know, prevents further injuries. So I'm really happy with that. But that would be Sarah, Georgia and myself, I guess. What practices followed after a race to ensure a horse receives the best possible care treatment? Well, initially, straight after a race, they're obviously brought in, they're washed down, cooled down, and then they have a good walk afterwards. We always walk them around not only till they dry off, but until they've stopped blowing. During that time we can check that they're not too distressed. We check very carefully for any nicks or cuts, because in a race they can pick up a little nick and it's easy to miss, and the next thing you know, you take them home, and the next day, the horses are very good at picking up infections in little scratches or cuts, so we're quite diligent with that. Then the next day we get them out, we'll trot them up, check they're all right. A lot of the times when a horse comes in from a race and the adrenaline's flowing, you won't notice an injury because they won't be lame straight away. So the next day is when you find out whether there's something a bit more sinister going on. So we check them out the next day, trot them up. Our horses, they usually have anything from 3 days to a week of just walking and going out in the paddock after a race. We let them really recover for a good few days before bringing them back into training. And because we do that, when they do come back into training, they come back fresh and well, and they're ready to go again. Could you please give us a day in the life of a horse at your yard and their general training routine? Well, the first thing I'd advise is to go to our YouTube channel. There's a video there which is specifically that. But for a horse, a day in the life, I suppose we get there about 6 o'clock in the morning, and Sarah will give them their breakfast, and they'll just relax and eat their breakfast. The horses that go out early, because we tend to try and keep a routine and keep them exercising the same time of day, it tends to be the horses that go out early, if they know they're going to go out early or they're expecting to go out early, they don't always eat their breakfast. They'll have a little pick at it, but they'll wait until they've gone out, and then when they come in, they go straight to their breakfast. It's amazing how they know. They're expecting to go out, they don't want to go out on a full stomach. So whether they go out early, they'll come back and eat their breakfast. They generally spend the rest of the morning in the stable, or the rest of the day, but we're there until lunchtime, at which time they'll get another feed. The stables are mucked out while they're out, so they always come back from their exercise to a nice clean stable, lots of hay, lots of fresh water, and then they're there for the day. Then in the afternoon we'll come back to the yard, evening stable time, give them fresh water again, top up their hay, we'll check them, we'll whip their rugs off, give them a little brush if they need it. In the afternoons we're just checking them, making sure they're all right, making sure they're comfortable, and then they'll have their evening meal, and then that's them until 6 o'clock in the morning. Well, I think that's everything. I hope you find that useful. I'll see you soon.